Jaxon Hale stood at the center of the massive training yard, his boots sinking slightly into the gritty soil beneath him. Around him, cadets from across the galaxy moved in an organized chaos, their eyes momentarily flicking toward him. The whispers were faint but unmistakable. Human. Deathworlder. His reputation preceded him, and he could already feel the weight of their skepticism. A cold wind swept across the yard, the alien flora in the distance swaying ominously. The planet Gryphor was a living nightmare, a death world in its purest form, with terrain more hostile than any cadet here could truly understand. Jaxon had survived Earth, where death lurked behind every corner. This was just another challenge in a long series. But it wasn't the environment that had him uneasy. It was the one standing in front of him. Instructor Zalvar. Tall, skeletal, with skin that shimmered in hues of silver and teal, Zalvar cut an imposing figure. His species, the Surtheri, were known for their cunning intellect and ruthless demeanor. Jaxon had heard stories. Stories of how they treated lower species with disdain, how they prided themselves on superiority. Stories that made him certain the Academy would never be a place for humans to thrive. Still, Jaxon had signed up for the challenge, eager to prove humanity's place in the universe. "You're the human," Zalvar's voice echoed across the yard, sharp and mocking. His tone sliced through the air, drawing attention from nearby cadets. Jaxon clenched his fists, but his expression remained unchanged. "I'm Jaxon Hale," he said, his voice steady. "And I'm here to prove I belong." Zalvar smirked. "We'll see about that." His voice was a venomous lilt, almost playful in its cruelty. "You think surviving a death world means you'll survive here? Gryphor's trials are unlike anything your primitive kind could ever comprehend." The Surtheri lifted a hand, and the atmosphere seemed to freeze. The other cadets, those who had been watching, shifted uncomfortably. No one dared challenge the instructor. No one except Jaxon. "Then show me," Jaxon said, stepping forward, the defiance in his voice a challenge of its own. "Let me see what Gryphor has to offer." Zalvar's smirk widened, his eyes gleaming with amusement. "Very well. You'll get your chance." He snapped his fingers, and an array of holographic images materialized in the air between them. "Your first test, Deathworlder, will be a survival simulation. In the jungle beyond this yard, you'll face creatures, obstacles, and terrain that will push you beyond your limits. Survive, and maybe you'll prove me wrong." Jaxon's gaze narrowed as the simulations of deadly predators, ranging from massive serpentine beasts to vicious, clawed insectoids, flashed in front of him. His heart rate remained steady. This wasn't the first time he'd seen danger up close. The rules of survival were simple. Fight or die. There was no middle ground on Earth, and there would be none here. Without taking his eyes off the projected creatures, he spoke again, his words deliberate and calm. "I didn't come here to fail. Set your test." "I'm ready." Zalvar gave a slight, dismissive nod, his cold eyes gleaming as he turned to the surrounding cadets. "Let's see how long this human lasts." With a gesture of his hand, the image of the jungle disappeared, replaced by the rugged landscape of Gryphor. The ground beneath Jaxon's feet shifted, and in an instant, he found himself standing on the edge of a dense, alien jungle. The air was thick with the scent of earth, moss, and decay. Sweat beaded on his brow, not from the heat, but from the mental shift. He could hear the rustling of leaves, the distant growls of unseen predators, and the chirping of insects. He took a deep breath, surveying his surroundings. The jungle was a maze of twisting vines, enormous trees, and dangerous undergrowth. The sky above was a dark, swirling mass of clouds, and the wind had begun to pick up, carrying with it the scent of something dangerous. "I've been here before," Jaxon thought. Earth had trained him for this. Every muscle in his body knew the rhythm of survival. Every part of him was finely tuned for this moment. Moving cautiously, Jaxon stepped forward, his eyes scanning for movement. His boots crunched softly against the foliage, and the jungle seemed to respond to him, as if it were alive and aware of his presence. But nothing moved. Not yet. He knew the first rule of survival: stay alert, stay smart. The jungle would test him, and his instincts would need to be sharp. A sound, soft but distinct, came from behind him. He spun, but nothing. Just the swaying trees. He exhaled, trying to focus. Then, a roar. The ground trembled beneath him, and something massive, too massive to ignore, moved through the underbrush, closing in on him with terrifying speed. Jaxon didn't hesitate. He dashed to the side, narrowly avoiding the maw of a massive, reptilian creature that emerged from the dense foliage. It was easily 5 meters long, with talons that could shred metal and teeth that gleamed with the promise of death. Jackson's instincts kicked in. He dove, rolling to the ground and coming up in a crouch, reaching for his combat knife. The creature roared in fury and lunged again, its massive body crashing toward him. He wasn't fast enough to avoid it completely, but he used the momentum of its attack to his advantage, slipping under its bulk and slicing at its belly with the blade. The creature howled in pain, retreating momentarily, but Jaxon wasn't done. He pushed himself to his feet and followed, fighting through the fear and the adrenaline. "Not bad for a human," Zaldar's voice echoed in his earpiece, tinged with mockery. "But I wonder how long you'll last in this jungle. Are you truly prepared to die here?" Jaxon didn't respond. He wasn't here to prove Zaldar wrong with words. His actions would do all the talking. The creature lunged again, and this time, Jaxon was ready. With a fluid motion, he sidestepped its attack, thrusting his knife into its flank. The creature spasmed and dropped to the ground with a final, pitiful cry. Jaxon stood over it, panting, blood staining his uniform. The jungle had claimed its first victim. But Jaxon wasn't finished yet. He knew this was only the beginning. And if Zaldar thought this was the best Gryphor had to offer, he was in for a rude awakening. Jaxon stood in the infirmary, his muscles sore from the grueling trial he'd just completed. The sterile scent of the medical facility stung his nose, but it was the burn in his side from the creature's claws that kept him grounded. The wound had been shallow but painful. The healing tech worked its magic, patching up his injury, but no amount of medical attention could erase the gnawing feeling in his gut, the need to prove himself, to show that Earth's Deathworlders were more than just survivors. They were warriors. As the med droid completed its final scan, Jaxon pulled on his uniform, still feeling the weight of the previous challenge. The creature was only the beginning. He'd survived, but it was the first of many trials. The door to the infirmary slid open, and Zaldar entered, his tall, gaunt figure looming over Jaxon. His silver skin shimmered faintly under the artificial lights, his cold eyes narrowing as he surveyed the human before him. "You're still standing," Zaldar said, his voice a mixture of disbelief and condescension. "Surprising." Jaxon met his gaze, unfazed. "I told you I wasn't here to fail." Zaldar tilted his head, studying him. "You think surviving one creature means anything? You've only proven you can survive Gryphor's smallest threats. There's much more ahead." A faint smile tugged at Jaxon's lips. "Then set the next test." "I'm ready." Zaldar's expression soured. "You'll wish you weren't." Without another word, Zaldar turned and left. Jaxon followed, already feeling the familiar tension coil in his gut. He wasn't about to back down. Not now, not ever. The training grounds were alive with activity when Jaxon arrived. Other cadets, some alien and some human, were preparing for their own tests. The atmosphere was thick with competitive energy, the sound of boots on metal floors and the hum of automated weapons systems filling the air. Jaxon's eyes scanned the yard, looking for any sign of his next trial. "Cadet Hale," came Zaldar's voice, sharp and commanding. "Your next test is about to begin." Jaxon snapped to attention, his pulse quickening. The test, whatever it was, would likely push him further than the first. He followed Zaldar through the winding corridors of the academy, each turn leading him deeper into the heart of the facility. Eventually, they reached a large, circular arena, its floor made of smooth, black stone that seemed to absorb the light. A tall, imposing alien figure stood in the center of the arena, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. A Zarek, one of the galaxy's most feared species, known for their sheer strength and deadly combat prowess. Your opponent, Zaldar said, gesturing to the Zarek. I trust you know the rules. Survive this combat scenario and you might earn a sliver of respect. The Zarek, whose body was covered in thick, chitinous armor, cracked his knuckles with a grin that revealed rows of sharp, yellow teeth. I hope you fight harder than you look, human. Jaxon remained calm, his breath steady as he eyed his opponent. The Zarek was twice his size, each movement slow but deliberate. Jaxon knew better than to rely on brute force, it wasn't the Deathworlder way. He'd need to outthink his opponent, anticipate his every move. Zaldar's voice echoed across the arena. The rules are simple, disable your opponent before they disable you. Weapons are allowed, but no fatalities. With a sudden roar, the Zarek lunged at Jaxon, claws extended, aiming for his head. Jackson's body reacted before his mind could catch up, ducking low and rolling to the side. The Zarek's claws missed by inches, slicing through the air with deadly precision. Jaxon wasted no time. He came up behind the Zarek, planting a knee into the creature's lower back and pushing forward with all his strength. The Zarek stumbled but quickly regained his balance, spinning to face Jaxon with a vicious snarl. You're quick, the Zarek growled, his voice a guttural rasp. But not fast enough. Jaxon didn't respond. Instead, he focused, his eyes locking onto the creature's movements, looking for any sign of weakness. The Zarek's speed was impressive, but there was a certain rhythm to his attacks, a predictable pattern that Jaxon could exploit. The next strike came faster than Jaxon had anticipated. The Zarek swung a massive fist toward him, but Jaxon ducked and, in the same motion, slid to the side. His fingers brushed against the ground, searching for anything that could turn the tide. His hand wrapped around a discarded metal rod, a makeshift weapon, but he didn't take the time to stand. He remained on the floor, watching the Zarek's every move. The Zarek's roar of frustration filled the arena as he came in again, faster this time. But Jaxon was ready. With a swift motion, he jabbed the metal rod into the Zarek's knee joint, a vulnerable spot the creature hadn't expected him to target. The rod struck with precision, and the Zarek howled in pain, staggering backward. Before the Zarek could recover, Jaxon was on him, using his momentum to slam the rod into the side of the creature's head. The impact rang out through the arena, and the Zarek collapsed to the ground, stunned but still conscious. For a brief moment, there was silence. Jaxon stood over his fallen opponent, his chest heaving with exertion. The Zarek glared up at him, clearly impressed despite the anger in his eyes. Zaldar's voice broke the tension. Impressive. For a human. Jaxon didn't reply. He simply stepped back, watching as the Zarek slowly pushed himself to his feet. There was no need to gloat. The test wasn't over yet, and the lesson wasn't learned. Not yet. Get up, Jaxon said, his voice low. If you can. Or are you too weak? The Zarek grinned through the pain, slowly rising to his feet. You've got guts, human. I'll give you that. Zaldar's eyes narrowed as he watched the interaction, his expression unreadable. Enough. The test is over. The Zarek nodded, stepping aside with a grunt. You earned this round, human. But there will be others. As Jaxon turned to leave, he felt a shift in the atmosphere. The cadets watching from the sidelines were no longer whispering in doubt. They were watching him now, not as the Deathworlder from Earth, but as a warrior in his own right. The odds had been stacked against him, but he had survived. Zaldar's voice followed him, cold and calculating. You've done well, Hale. But this is only the beginning. Keep this up, and maybe I'll stop underestimating you. Jaxon didn't look back. His body ached, his wounds throbbed, but something else burned inside him now, something stronger than pain. A fire. A hunger. He would prove humanity's worth to the galaxy, no matter the cost. Jaxon stood at the edge of the Gryphor arena, the weight of his last challenge hanging in the air like a storm cloud. His body was a canvas of bruises, cuts, and abrasions from the past 2 trials, but none of them mattered now. The sweat on his brow, the thumping pulse in his neck, all of it was secondary to the task at hand. The final test had begun. Zaldar's voice echoed across the arena, cold and commanding. The jungle will be your final challenge, Cadet Hale. Survive it, and you may earn your place here. Fail, and you will leave with nothing but humiliation. Jaxon didn't flinch. He had nothing to prove to Zaldar anymore. His eyes scanned the dense jungle beyond the arena's walls. The air was thick with humidity, and the distant roars of unknown creatures made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. This wasn't a simulation like the previous trials. This was real. Gryphor's jungle had a reputation, survivors were rare, and death wasn't a possibility, it was an expectation. Your objective, Zaldar continued, is simple. Survive. You'll be dropped into the heart of the jungle with no supplies. The terrain is hostile, and the creatures are worse. You'll be given no help, no rescue. If you want to live, you'll have to do it yourself. Jaxon didn't reply. His eyes narrowed as he took a step forward, the ground beneath his boots crunching with each movement. He could hear the cadets murmuring behind him, their curiosity mingled with doubt. He didn't care what they thought. Zaldar's voice cut through the tension. Begin. Without warning, the floor beneath Jaxon opened up, and he was falling. The world blurred into darkness for a split second before the harsh winds slapped against his face. He was plummeting toward the jungle below, the canopy visible through the small opening above him. His heart pounded, but there was no fear. There was only focus. The moment his feet touched the ground, his body instinctively dropped into a low crouch, his hand reaching for a branch to steady himself. He scanned his surroundings, his mind already calculating his next move. The jungle was alive with movement, the trees towering above him like giants, their leaves rustling in the wind. The ground was wet and slick, but the air was thick with the promise of danger. The first step was always the same: find shelter. He couldn't afford to be caught out in the open. As he moved deeper into the jungle, he kept his senses sharp, listening for any sign of predators. The sounds of the jungle were unnerving: birds calling, creatures chittering, the distant growl of something larger. But none of it mattered. Jaxon was a survivor. An hour passed, and Jaxon had found his shelter, a hollowed-out log beneath a massive tree, its roots twisted and gnarled like a network of veins. He settled inside, allowing his body to rest for a moment. But rest wasn't something he could afford for long. Every moment here was a battle, every second an opportunity for the jungle to claim him. He took a deep breath, his mind calculating the next phase of the trial. He needed food, water, and a weapon. The jungle was full of dangers, and the odds were stacked against him, but Jaxon was used to being the underdog. It was where he thrived. The next sound he heard was a rustling, a subtle shift in the air that sent a chill down his spine. Without hesitation, he crouched low, his muscles tense. His eyes flicked toward the noise, his breath steady. A massive form emerged from the foliage, one of the Gryphor jungle's most feared predators, the HFY. The creature was a towering, hulking mass of muscle, with thick, bony armor plating covering its body. Its eyes glowed a faint blue, its mouth dripping with saliva. It was fast, relentless, and deadly. Jaxon didn't hesitate. He darted to his left, making as little noise as possible. The HFY's head snapped toward him, its eyes narrowing as it locked onto his movement. In the blink of an eye, it was charging. Jaxon's instincts kicked in. He dove forward, rolling to the side just as the HFY's claws slashed through the air where he had been moments before. The ground beneath him vibrated as the creature barreled past, its roar shaking the very trees around them. He was already on his feet, his hand reaching for the closest weapon. His fingers brushed against a sharp rock, jagged and thick. Perfect. Without hesitation, he turned to face the beast, his breath steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The HFY turned, its massive form moving with surprising speed. But Jaxon was faster. He lunged forward, ducking under the creature's swipe and driving the rock into its exposed side. The HFY howled in pain, staggering back as Jaxon scrambled to maintain his balance. He didn't give it a chance to recover. In one fluid motion, he dove again, this time leaping onto its back and driving the rock into the base of its skull. The creature let out a final, guttural roar before crumpling to the ground. Jaxon stood over it, his chest heaving with exertion. Blood dripped from his hands, but he didn't hesitate. The trial wasn't over. It would never be over until he had nothing left to give. As he moved away from the fallen creature, his eyes scanned the jungle again. He needed to keep moving. Zaldar wouldn't be impressed by just one kill. He needed to survive the entire jungle. Hours passed as Jaxon navigated the treacherous terrain, evading predators and hunting for food. Each step was calculated, every decision weighed against the odds. The jungle had claimed many before him, and it would gladly claim him if he wasn't careful. As the sun began to dip beneath the thick canopy, casting long shadows across the jungle floor, Jaxon found himself standing in a clearing. In the distance, he could see the towering silhouette of the Gryphor Academy's observation tower. He was close. But so was the next test. The ground beneath him rumbled. A shadow loomed overhead. The Hivrak wasn't the only creature hunting tonight. From the edge of the jungle, a massive, winged beast emerged, its leathery wings beating the air with terrifying force. It was a Zorkai, a flying predator known for its agility and strength. Its eyes glowed with hunger as it swooped down toward him, its talons extending. Jaxon didn't flinch. The jungle had trained him for moments like this. His hand reached for a branch nearby, snapping it off with a sharp crack. He spun, aiming the makeshift spear at the beast as it lunged toward him. In the final moment, he thrust it upward, striking the creature in the chest just as it came within reach. The Zorkai let out a screech of fury, its massive wings flapping wildly as it tried to shake off the blow. But it was too late. Jaxon leaped forward, driving the spear deeper into the creature's chest until it stopped moving. He stood over it, his chest rising and falling as he caught his breath. He had done it. He had survived. Against the odds, against the jungle, against the prejudices of Zaldar and the galaxy at large, Jaxon Hale had proven that humanity, he, was a force to be reckoned with. And as the night fell around him, he knew that Gryphor's jungle had no more power over him. He had earned his place. Not just here, but in the galaxy itself.